The hospital hallway smelled like disinfectant and fear. I stood there holding a bag of groceries I'd bought for my mother when her voice cut through the quiet like a knife. "You destroyed my life," she screamed, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "You abandoned me when I needed you most." Everyone stopped. A nurse froze mid-step. An elderly man in a wheelchair turned to stare. Two visitors whispered to each other, their eyes full of judgment. My face burned hot. My hands trembled around the plastic bag handles. "Mom, please," I whispered. "Let's talk inside." "Don't touch me." She pulled away like I was dangerous. Tears streamed down her face. This woman pretends to care, but she's heartless. Completely heartless. A security guard stepped closer, watching me like I might be the problem. My throat felt tight. I wanted to explain, to defend myself, but the words wouldn't come. Then I saw her. A woman in a dark blue jacket with a hospital badge. She walked toward me with a clipboard, her expression serious and suspicious. My stomach dropped. This was about to get worse. "My name is Violet Hayes. I'm 34 years old, from Richmond, Virginia. If you want to hear more stories like this one, please subscribe to this channel. You won't believe where this goes." The woman with the clipboard introduced herself as Patricia, a hospital social worker. She pulled me into a small office down the hall. "Ms. Hayes," she said, sitting across from me, "I need to ask you some questions. We've received several complaints about your mother's care situation." My heart pounded. Complaints? From who? "Your mother has expressed concerns that she's not receiving adequate support from family." Patricia's pen hovered over her notepad. "She says you haven't been visiting regularly or helping with her medical needs." I couldn't breathe. "That's not true. I'm here almost every single day." Patricia's expression didn't change. "She's filed 3 formal complaints this week alone." 3 complaints. While I was buying her favorite snacks, picking up her prescriptions, and calling every morning to check on her. "There must be some mistake," I said. But Patricia just wrote something down, and I knew nobody believed me. 12 years. That's how long I'd been doing this. I gave up a promotion in Denver because my mother said she couldn't be alone. I ended my engagement to Thomas because he wanted to move to Seattle, and she cried until I stayed. I stopped going to book club. Stopped taking weekend trips. Stopped having a life that wasn't built around her doctor appointments and grocery runs. Every morning started with a phone call. "Violet, I need you." Every evening ended with another one. "Where were you?" I called 4 times. I paid for her medications when insurance didn't cover them. I hired cleaners for her apartment. I brought meals, sorted pills, scheduled appointments, and held her hand through every test and procedure. My savings account was nearly empty. My friendships had faded to occasional text messages. My dating life was non-existent. But I told myself it was what daughters did. I told myself she needed me. Now, sitting in that social worker's office, a horrible thought crept into my mind. How long had she been telling people I was selfish? 2 days later, I arrived at the hospital during afternoon visiting hours. A nurse I'd never seen before gave me a cold look as I walked past the station. "Room 347, she said flatly, not bothering with pleasantries. I'd been coming here for 3 weeks since my mother's hip surgery. The other nurses knew me by name. This one looked at me like I was trash. Inside the room, my mother was sitting up in bed, looking fragile and small. She smiled when she saw me. "Oh, Violet. You came." "Of course I came, Mom. I brought your magazines." I set them on the table beside her, then noticed a nurse, the same cold one from the hallway, standing in the corner, reviewing a chart. "Mrs. Hayes has been telling us she doesn't get many visitors," the nurse said without looking up. My mother's eyes went wide with fake surprise. "Oh, I didn't mean it like that, dear." But she absolutely did. And the nurse clearly believed her version. I felt my stomach twist. The next afternoon, I came earlier than usual. As I approached my mother's room, I heard crying. Her voice wobbled through the open door. "It's so hard being alone. My daughter, she's just so busy with her own life." I understand, but I stopped in the hallway, hidden from view. A visitor's voice responded, soft and sympathetic. That must be so difficult for you. I don't want to complain, my mother continued, sniffling. She has her job, her friends. I can't expect her to drop everything for me. My hands clenched into fists. I'd called out of work twice that week to be here. Then I stepped into the doorway. My mother's face transformed instantly. The tears stopped. Her expression brightened into cheerful surprise. Violet, sweetheart. She reached for me like I was her whole world. I was just talking about you. The visitor smiled politely and excused herself. My mother patted the chair beside her bed. Sit, darling. Tell me about your day. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just been lying 30 seconds ago. How long had she been doing this? 3 days passed. I kept visiting, kept helping, kept playing my role. Then everything shifted. A young nurse named Bethany came in to check my mother's vitals. She was maybe 25, with kind eyes and a professional smile. Mrs. Hayes, Bethany said while adjusting the blood pressure cuff, I need to update our records. Who's been signing your discharge paperwork and handling your medical billing? My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. The room went completely silent. Bethany looked up from her tablet. Ma'am? Well, the hospital handles most of that, my mother said vaguely. Right, but someone needs to be your primary contact and financial guarantor. Who's been managing that? My mother's eyes flicked to me, then away. I've been handling my own affairs. Bethany frowned slightly. She tapped her screen. Our records show Violet Hayes has been listed as your primary contact and has signed all admission papers for the past 3 weeks. She's also listed as having paid for several procedures not covered by your insurance. The silence stretched out like elastic ready to snap. My mother said nothing. Bethany looked between us, confused. Is that information incorrect? No, I said quietly. That's correct. Bethany nodded and left the room, but I saw her glance back at my mother with a different expression than before. I stopped begging for her approval that day. Instead, I went home and pulled out every piece of paper I'd been keeping in a file box under my bed. 12 years of receipts, bank statements, medical bills, and email confirmations. I made copies of everything. I organized them by year, then by category. Grocery receipts, prescription payments, utility bills I'd covered when she couldn't, plane tickets I'd canceled, job opportunities I'd turned down with email timestamps showing the dates. I created a spreadsheet with dates, amounts, and descriptions. Every doctor's appointment I'd driven her to. Every midnight phone call. Every emergency that pulled me away from my own life. The numbers were staggering. Over $60,000. Hundreds of hours. A decade of sacrifice. I also started keeping a journal. Not of my feelings, but of facts. Dates, times, conversations, witnesses. My tone with my mother didn't change. I stayed polite, stayed helpful. But inside, something had shifted. As I reviewed the paperwork one more time, I noticed something in the hospital billing statements that made my blood run cold. I found a Facebook post from last month. My mother had written, "Feeling blessed to have gotten through this difficult time. So grateful I could handle everything myself. Sometimes you have to be your own hero." 43 likes. Dozens of comments praising her strength and independence. My name wasn't mentioned once. I scrolled further back. More posts, all painting the same picture. She was the brave survivor. She was handling everything alone. She was so strong. I kept scrolling. Found a post from 2 years ago. When family disappoints you, you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. My cousin Dylan had commented, "You're amazing, Aunt Rebecca. So sorry Violet isn't helping more." I stared at that comment until my eyes burned. I'd been paying her mortgage that month because she claimed she couldn't afford it. I had the canceled check to prove it. My phone rang. It was Dylan. "Violet, what the hell is wrong with you?" His voice was sharp with anger. "Aunt Rebecca told me you've been neglecting her. She's in the hospital and you can't even visit regularly?" My throat went dry. "Dylan, that's not. Don't lie to me. She's family. How can you be so selfish?" He hung up before I could explain. The calls came one after another. My Aunt Stephanie. My Uncle Warren. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. All of them furious. All of them convinced I was a terrible daughter. Your mother raised you better than this, Aunt Stephanie said coldly. She's alone in that hospital while you're out living your life, Uncle Warren added. Nobody asked for my side. Nobody questioned my mother's story. I sat in my apartment that night feeling completely betrayed. My mother had been building this narrative for years, and I'd been too busy taking care of her to notice. On Sunday, 4 relatives showed up at the hospital at the same time. They surrounded my mother's bed like I was the enemy. We wanted to be here for you, Aunt Stephanie said, shooting me a disgusted look. Since your own daughter can't be bothered. My mother smiled weakly. Oh, you're all too kind. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, Dylan said firmly. Family takes care of family. Some people just forget that. He stared directly at me. I stood there, silent, watching them come for her. My mother caught my eye once, just for a second, and I saw something there that made my skin crawl. Satisfaction. The next day, I called the hospital and asked to speak with the patient advocate. The patient advocate's name was Monroe Pierce. He was in his 50s, calm and professional, with reading glasses that sat low on his nose. We met in a conference room on the 3rd floor. I brought my folder of documents. Ms. Hayes, tell me what's going on, Monroe said, folding his hands on the table. I explained everything. The complaints, the lies, the family backlash. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Do you have documentation of your involvement in your mother's care? I slid the folder across the table. He spent 20 minutes reviewing everything. His eyebrows rose several times, but he said nothing until he closed the folder. Ms. Hayes, I need to be very clear with you about something. His tone was serious. You've been functioning as an unpaid caregiver without any legal protections. No power of attorney, no caregiver agreement, no formal arrangement. I didn't think I needed that. She's my mother. I understand. But without legal documentation, you have no rights here. Your mother can tell any story she wants, and you have no standing to correct it. My heart sank. So there's nothing I can do? I didn't say that. Monroe tapped the folder. You have the right to establish boundaries. You can step back from informal caregiving. You're not legally obligated to continue. The words hung in the air. I could stop. I could actually stop. What happens to her if I do? I asked. The hospital will arrange appropriate care through proper channels, Monroe said gently. Your mother is an adult. She's responsible for her own care plan. I sat there, staring at my hands. For 12 years, I'd thought I had no choice. I started small. When my mother called at 11 p.m. asking me to bring her a different pillow from home, I said, I can bring it tomorrow during visiting hours. But I can't sleep without it, she whined. I'm sorry, Mom. I'll bring it in the morning. I hung up. My hands shook, but I didn't call back. When she texted at midnight asking for her special lotion, I didn't respond until 8 a.m. I'll check the gift shop today. No more midnight runs. No more dropping everything. No more emergencies that weren't actually emergencies. I still visited. I still helped with medical decisions. But only during reasonable hours and only for legitimate needs. The hospital staff continued handling everything official. I signed what needed signing, but I stopped doing the extras. No more fluffing pillows. No more rearranging flowers. No more sitting there for 6 hours just to keep her company. 2 days into this new routine, my phone rang at 7 a.m. Violet, where are you? I need you right now. I'll be there during afternoon visiting hours, Mom. But I need. This afternoon, Mom. I have to go. I ended the call. My heart hammered. I felt guilty, cruel, selfish. But I also felt something else. Free. 3 days later, my mother called me into her room and closed the door. Her sweetness vanished like smoke. What is wrong with you? Her voice was low and venomous. You're embarrassing me in front of the staff. They think I raised a selfish brat. I stayed calm. I'm visiting regularly and helping with your care. You used to be here all the time. Now you show up for an hour and leave. Her eyes were hard. People are noticing, Violet. Good, I said quietly. Her face twisted with shock, then rage. Don't you dare take that tone with me. I'm your mother. I gave birth to you. I sacrificed everything for you. And I've been sacrificing for you for 12 years, I said, my voice steady. That's going to look different now. You're being cruel and selfish, just like your father. She spat the words like poison. I'll tell everyone what you're really like. I'll make sure they all know. You already have, Mom. She stared at me, breathing hard. If you don't start acting right, I'll file another complaint. I'll tell them you're abusing me. I said nothing, just made a mental note of the date, time, and exact words. 2 days later, the hospital called. My mother had filed another formal complaint. The hospital administration asked me to attend a meeting. I walked into a conference room on the 4th floor. 3 people sat at the table. Monroe Pierce, a hospital administrator named Miss Caldwell, and the head nurse for my mother's floor. Thank you for coming, Miss Hayes, Miss Caldwell said. She was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes. We're reviewing the complaints filed by your mother. I understand, I said. We take all complaints seriously, Miss Caldwell continued. However, Mr. Pierce mentioned you have documentation that might be relevant. I pulled out my folder again. This time, I'd added printed text messages, call logs from my phone provider, and a detailed timeline. They reviewed everything in silence. After 15 minutes, Ms. Caldwell removed her reading glasses. Ms. Hayes, these records show extensive financial support and consistent involvement in your mother's care. Yes, ma'am. The head nurse, whose name tag read Supervisor Williams, spoke up. This contradicts what Mrs. Hayes has been telling our staff. I know, I said simply. Ms. Caldwell exchanged a glance with Monroe. We'll need to review the financial records more thoroughly. Can you provide complete billing statements? I can have them to you by tomorrow. That would be helpful. Ms. Caldwell made a note. We'll be in touch. As I left the conference room, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The truth was starting to come out. I spent that entire evening organizing 12 years of financial records. Bank statements showing payments for my mother's rent, utilities, and medical expenses. Credit card statements showing groceries, medications, and household items I'd purchased. Canceled checks. Wire transfer confirmations. PayPal receipts. I created a summary document, $62,417 over 12 years. Not counting gas, time off work, or opportunities I'd turned down. I documented everything, 314 doctor's appointments I'd attended, 108 prescription pickups, and countless emergency calls. I printed everything, made digital copies, and organized it all in a thick binder with color-coded tabs. The next morning, I delivered it to Miss Caldwell's office. Her assistant's eyes widened at the size of the binder. I'll make sure she gets this. 2 days later, I received a call. Ms. Hayes, this is Ms. Caldwell. We've reviewed your documentation. We'd like to schedule a formal meeting with all involved parties. My stomach clenched. All parties meaning? You, your mother, and our administrative team. We need to address these discrepancies directly. When? Friday at 2 p.m. Will that work? I took a deep breath. Yes. I'll be there. This was it. The truth was about to come out in front of everyone. The shift started small, but I noticed it. Nurse Bethany smiled at me in the hallway. Good afternoon, Ms. Hayes. Your mother's doing well today. Not cold. Not suspicious. Just professional and kind. Another nurse stopped me near the elevator. I just wanted to say, I looked over the care notes. You've been really involved in your mother's treatment. That's wonderful. I mumbled a thank you, unsure how to respond. Even Supervisor Williams nodded respectfully when I passed the nurse's station. The staff had seen the documentation. They knew the truth now. But my mother noticed the change too. When I visited that afternoon, she was agitated, picking at her blanket with nervous fingers. The nurses are acting strange, she said. They keep asking me questions about my family support system. Are they? I kept my voice neutral. Something's going on. Did you say something to them? I've been honest about my involvement in your care, Mom. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means I provided documentation when they asked for it. Documentation. Her voice rose. What kind of documentation? Medical records. Financial records. The things they needed to review your complaints. Her face went pale, then red. You had no right. I had every right, Mom. They asked and I answered. She opened her mouth to say something else, but stopped when Supervisor Williams appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Hayes, we need to discuss your care plan. May I come in? My mother's expression shifted instantly to sweet and fragile, but I saw panic in her eyes. She was losing control of the narrative. Friday arrived. I dressed carefully, professionally. I brought my binder and a notepad. The conference room was larger this time. Ms. Caldwell sat at the head of the table. Monroe Pierce was there, along with Supervisor Williams and a hospital lawyer I hadn't met before. My mother was wheeled in by an aide. She looked small and vulnerable in her wheelchair, wearing her favorite cardigan. Thank you all for being here, Ms. Caldwell began. We're here to address concerns raised by Mrs. Hayes regarding her care and family support. My mother nodded weakly. I just want my daughter to be more involved. Is that so wrong? Ms. Caldwell opened a folder. Mrs. Hayes, you've filed 4 formal complaints stating that your daughter has abandoned you and refuses to provide support. Yes. My mother's voice trembled. She barely visits. She doesn't help with anything. I see. Ms. Caldwell pulled out a document. According to our records, Violet Hayes is listed as your primary emergency contact, medical decision-maker, and has been present at 98% of your medical consultations over the past 3 weeks. My mother's face flickered. Well, recently yes, but before? We also have financial records. Ms. Caldwell slid papers across the table. Ms. Hayes is paid for 17 procedures and medications not covered by your insurance, totaling $8,300 in the past year alone. Silence. Mrs. Hayes, Ms. Caldwell continued, her voice firm. Can you explain why you filed complaints stating your daughter provides no support? My mother's mouth opened and closed. She used to do more. She's been pulling away. Pulling away from what specifically? My mother looked trapped. From helping me, being there. Ms. Caldwell gestured to me. Ms. Hayes, would you like to respond? I spoke quietly. I'd like you to check my mother's phone records for the past month. The hospital lawyer, Mr. Brennan, pulled up the phone records on his laptop. They'd subpoenaed them as part of the investigation. What are we looking for? He asked. Calls from my mother to my cell phone, I said. He scrolled, then stopped. There are a lot of calls. How many? Ms. Caldwell asked. In the past month, 147 calls from Mrs. Hayes to this number. He looked up. Many at late hours. Several lasting over an hour. My mother shifted in her wheelchair. Mrs. Hayes, Ms. Caldwell said slowly, you called your daughter 147 times in 30 days while simultaneously claiming she's abandoned you? Those were. I was just checking in, my mother stammered. According to these records, your daughter answered 90% of those calls, Mr. Brennan added. Supervisor Williams leaned forward. Mrs. Hayes, I need to ask you directly. Has your daughter been neglecting your care? My mother looked around the room. Everyone was staring at her. She hasn't been as attentive as before, she said weakly. But has she neglected your medical care or basic needs? Ms. Caldwell pressed. My mother said nothing. Mrs. Hayes, we need an answer. No, she finally whispered. Not technically. The word hung in the air. Not technically. Dr. Hammond, my mother's primary physician, appeared in the doorway. Ms. Caldwell, may I speak? Please, doctor. I've reviewed Mrs. Hayes's care notes. Her daughter has been present for every major medical decision and has advocated appropriately for her treatment. I have no concerns about neglect. My mother stared at her hands. After the meeting, my mother refused to look at me. Over the next few days, she started lashing out at everyone. She snapped at nurses, complained about the food, accused the night staff of ignoring her call button. Everyone here is incompetent, she told Aunt Stephanie during a visit. They don't know what they're doing. But Aunt Stephanie had been at the hospital during the meeting. She'd heard everything. "And Rebecca," Stephanie said carefully, "the staff here seems very professional." "You don't know what it's like," my mother said bitterly. "Nobody understands what I've been through." That evening, my phone rang. It was Stephanie. "Violet, I owe you an apology." Her voice was heavy with shame. "I had no idea. Your mother made it sound like you'd abandoned her completely." "I know. The things she said, we all believed her." "I'm so sorry. Thank you for saying that." Over the next week, 3 more relatives called to apologize. Dylan sent a long text message admitting he'd been wrong. My mother's support system was crumbling, and she knew it. She tried calling me late at night, crying. "Everyone's turning against me. Even my own family." "Mom, they're just seeing the truth." "The truth? The truth is that I'm alone and nobody cares." "That's not true. People care. But they can't help you if you keep lying to them." She hung up on me. The hospital scheduled a formal family meeting with a mediator present. My mother sat on one side of the table. I sat on the other. Monroe Pierce facilitated. "This meeting is to establish clear expectations and boundaries going forward," Monroe began. "Mrs. Hayes, you'll be discharged next week. We need to create a care plan. I need Violet to take care of me," my mother said immediately. Monroe looked at me. "Ms. Hayes, are you willing to continue as primary caregiver?" I pulled out a document I'd prepared. "I'm willing to help within specific boundaries." I slid it across the table. It outlined what I would and wouldn't do. Medical appointments with advance notice. Emergency contact availability. Financial assistance up to a certain amount monthly. But no more midnight calls. No more guilt trips. No more unreasonable demands. "This is ridiculous," my mother said, not even reading it. "I'm your mother. And I'm your daughter, not your servant," I said quietly. Monroe intervened. "Mrs. Hayes, these boundaries seem reasonable. Your daughter is offering substantial support. It's not enough. She owes me more than this." "I don't owe you anything, Mom." My voice was steady. "I've given you 12 years. I've given you $60,000. I've given you my relationships, my career opportunities, and my peace of mind. That's more than enough. After everything I did for you. You raised me. That was your job as a parent. It doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my entire life for you." The room went silent. My mother stared at me, and for the first time, I saw something break in her expression. She had nothing left to say. Words spread through the family quickly. My mother's reputation, built on years of playing the victim, began to collapse. Relatives stopped offering unlimited sympathy. Friends asked questions she couldn't answer. "How could Violet abandon you when she's paid your bills?" someone asked on Facebook. My mother deleted the post. At her church, people who'd heard the story started keeping their distance. "We heard about the hospital situation," one woman said coolly. "It's unfortunate when family relationships become so complicated." My mother's circle of sympathy shrank to almost nothing. She still had a few loyal defenders, but even they seemed less certain now. I didn't gloat. I didn't spread the story myself. But I also didn't hide it when people asked directly. "My mother and I have had some challenges," I'd say simply. "We're working on establishing healthier boundaries." 3 weeks after her discharge, my mother called me. "Violet, I need help moving some boxes." "I can help this Saturday between 2 and 4, I said. "But I need it done today." "Saturday between 2 and 4, Mom. That's what works for me." Long pause. "Fine. Saturday." She was learning. Slowly, painfully, but learning. The control she'd had over me for 12 years was gone. My new boundaries held firm. When my mother called asking me to take her to an appointment 45 minutes away with 2 hours' notice, I said, "I need at least 3 days' notice for appointments. You can reschedule, or I can help you arrange medical transport." She hung up on me, but an hour later, she called back. "Fine. Next Tuesday at 2. Does that work?" "Yes. I'll pick you up at 1:30. Small victories. I started saying no without guilt. No to last-minute demands. No to unreasonable expectations. No to being treated like I existed only to serve her. I also said yes to things I'd given up. Yes to dinner with friends. Yes to a weekend trip. Yes to a promotion at work that required occasional travel. When I told my mother about the promotion, she was silent. That means you won't always be available, she said finally. That's correct. What if I need you? I'll help when I can, within reason. But my job comes first.
She didn't argue.
She couldn't. The hospital had made it clear. I had the right to my own life. One evening, I was having coffee with Aunt Stephanie when she said, "You seem different now. Lighter." I feel different. Your mother's having a hard time adjusting. I know. But that's her journey, not mine. Stephanie nodded. You're right. I'm proud of you, Violet. Those words meant more than she knew. My mother tried the guilt one more time. She called crying at midnight. I can't sleep. I'm so anxious. I need you. Mom, it's midnight. If you're having a medical emergency, call 911. Otherwise, I'll call you in the morning. How can you be so cold? I raised you better than this. You raised me to care about people. That includes caring about myself. I'm your mother. I should come first. You came first for 12 years, Mom. That's over now. You're going to regret this when I'm gone. The old me would have caved at that line. The old me would have rushed over, apologizing and promising to do better. The new me said, I'll talk to you tomorrow, Mom. Good night. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning, I had 17 missed calls and 9 voicemails, each more frantic than the last. I listened to them calmly, then called her back at 9 a.m. Good morning, Mom. You turned off your phone. I could have died. Did you have a medical emergency? Silence. Mom?
No.
But I could have. If you have an emergency, you call 911. That's what they're there for. She made a frustrated noise. You used to care. I still care. But I care about both of us now, not just you. A week later, Monroe called me. Your mother reached out to me. She asked if there was any way to force you to provide more care. My stomach dropped. And I explained very clearly that adult children are not legally required to provide care for their parents. She seemed surprised. I bet she was. She also asked about the complaints she filed. I told her they've been resolved and closed. There's nothing to pursue. Relief washed over me. Thank you, Monroe. You're welcome, Violet. You did the right thing. 6 months later, my life looked completely different. I took the promotion. My new role involved managing a team and occasionally traveling to conferences. I went on a date with a man named Felix I'd met through a friend. We clicked immediately, and for the first time in years, I let myself imagine a future that included someone else. I traveled to Boston for a weekend with college friends I hadn't seen in 5 years. We laughed until our stomachs hurt and stayed up talking about everything we'd missed. I started therapy to work through 12 years of codependency and manipulation. My therapist helped me understand that loving my mother didn't mean losing myself. I even joined a caregiver support group where I met others who'd experienced similar situations. Hearing their stories made me feel less alone. My mother noticed the changes. You seem busy, she said during one of our scheduled weekly calls. I am. Work's going really well. And you're dating someone? I am.
Pause.
That's nice. It wasn't enthusiastic, but it wasn't manipulative either. Progress. We settled into a new rhythm. I visited twice a month. I helped with medical appointments and major decisions. I called once a week. But I didn't drop everything anymore. I didn't sacrifice my happiness for her comfort. And slowly, surprisingly, our relationship became less toxic. She stopped calling me in the middle of the night. Stopped demanding impossible things. Stopped trying to guilt me into obedience. Maybe she'd learned. Maybe she'd just given up fighting. Either way, I was free. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I was visiting my mother at her apartment, helping her organize some medical paperwork. We'd been working in comfortable silence when she spoke. Violet, I need to tell you something. I looked up. What is it? She stared at her hands, twisting a tissue between her fingers. I was afraid of being alone. That's why I did what I did. My heart stopped. The lies, the complaints, the guilt trips. I was terrified that if I wasn't constantly in crisis, you'd leave me. So I created crises. I said nothing, letting her continue. I thought if you were always worried about me, always rushing to help, you'd never have time to build a life without me. Her voice cracked. I was so scared of being forgotten that I made myself impossible to ignore. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Violet. I'm sorry for all of it. You deserved better than what I gave you. I sat there, processing her words.
Part of me wanted to be angry.
Part of me wanted to say it was too late. But another part, the part that had been healing over the past 6 months, felt something unexpected. Compassion. Thank you for telling me that, Mom. Can you forgive me? I thought about it carefully. I can forgive you. But I can't forget what happened. And I won't go back to how things were. She nodded. I understand. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then she asked, do you think we can start over? Build something better? Maybe, I said. But it has to be different this time. It will be. I promise. I wasn't sure if she could keep that promise. But I was willing to let her try. 1 year later, I stood in my new apartment, unpacking boxes. Felix helped me arrange furniture. Friends stopped by with housewarming gifts. The space was mine, filled with things I'd chosen, a life I'd built on my own terms. My mother came to visit. She brought flowers and stayed for exactly 2 hours as we'd planned. Your place is lovely, she said, and she meant it. Thank you. She hugged me goodbye at the door. I'm proud of you, Violet. Those words, ones I'd waited years to hear, finally felt genuine. Our relationship wasn't perfect. We still had hard conversations. She still slipped into old patterns sometimes, and I still had to remind her of boundaries. But it was better.
Real.
Built on honesty instead of manipulation. The hospital staff who'd watched the whole situation unfold sent me a card. Congratulations on your new beginning. You handled everything with grace and strength. Supervisor Williams called to check in. I just wanted you to know what you did helped us change some of our protocols. We're training staff to recognize family dynamics like yours. You made a difference. I didn't destroy my mother's life. That was never my goal.
I saved my own.
I learned that loving someone doesn't mean drowning in their needs. That being a good daughter doesn't require setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. I learned that the truth, even when it's painful, is better than a comfortable lie. Most importantly, I learned that I mattered. My dreams, my health, my happiness, they all mattered. And nobody, not even my mother, had the right to take that away from me. I was free. Truly, finally free. And that was the greatest victory of all.